In this video, we're going to discuss image planes. Image planes allow you to import an image sequence, a still image, or a movie file attached to the camera so you can see it in the view panel. Then you can use that as reference to either model or to animate to, or even to render out with your 3D objects, where you combine your 3D objects with your image. So how does that work? Well, for example, say I brought back the chair from Chapter 5 just as a piece of geometry. I've also set my rendering resolution to 1280 by 720 and turn on the resolution gate so I can see that frame. In that case, if you want to bring in a render or bring in an image sequence, for instance, to attach as an image plane, you go up to the View menu of that camera, go to Image Plane, and then go to Import Image. Now, I've already made a sequence that you can test, and this happens to be in the Working Files folder under Chapter 14 in a subfolder called Car. And it's a 9-frame sequence. Now, you can have longer sequences as long as you want. I'm just using a short sequence just as a demo. So if you do have an image sequence, all you have to do is click on the very first frame of that sequence, for instance, car.001.jpg, and hit Open. As soon as you do that, you'll see that first frame instantaneously through the view of that camera. And since the resolution of my image sequence is the same resolution as my render resolution, then that image sequence fits my resolution gate perfectly. Now, this image plane is actually attached to the camera. So here's that perspective camera that I'm working with. If I dolly out, say from the top view, there's the image plane right there. And in fact, it'll appear in all the different views. Here it is in the front view. And in fact, it's attached to the camera permanently, at least until you delete it, and we'll talk about that later. So for example, I move that camera around, you'll see the image plane sticks to it. This is true whether I rotate the camera or scale the camera or move the camera. It's always stuck to the camera so that it always fits the resolution gate perfectly. Now, any kind of 3D object that is in between the camera and the image plane will appear in front of the image plane. So for example, the chair is in front of the image plane. In fact, what I can do is move the camera around to try to position the camera so it looks like the chair is sitting on the ground. Of course, I can always move the geometry or scale or rotate it to put it where I want. But you can create the illusion that that 3D object is part of the environment. Now, this is a simple chair, but you can use anything you want. It could be a very complex character or a piece of an environment or a set. Whatever you want to put in front of the image plane is fine. At this point, if you have an object or multiple objects in front of your image plane, just use that image plane as reference. For example, you could start to animate your objects, and in order to make them look like they're bouncing across the ground, refer to the image plane to make sure that the geometry is in the correct position. Or you can use this as modeling reference. Let's say I didn't have any geometry in here. What I could do is bring in a drawing of what I wanted to model, and even attach that to, say, the front camera, or attach the image plane to the side camera, use that as reference and model over the top of it, where what you're modeling always appears in front of the image plane. Again, to make it appear in front of the image plane, it simply has to be between the camera and the image plane. Now, it's true that if the object gets behind the image plane, it's going to disappear. Like, now it's behind, now it's gone. So you keep the objects in front of the image plane. I'll just click on Do to get it back. Or what you can do is go to the attributes for the image plane itself and push the image plane further back in space. Let's try that. I'll go to View, Image Plane. And here are the attributes for the image plane I just loaded up. Image plane attributes, image plane 1. So here's the attributes for the image plane. And one trick for pushing the image plane further back is depth. Depth determines how far away the plane is from the camera, but if I use a larger number like 150, the plane gets pushed back. It also gets scaled up, and that's in order to make sure that it fits the resolution gate. It doesn't really affect anything. The only thing that will happen is you'll have more room to work in. So here is my camera. There's my chair, which is in front of the camera. And here's my image plane way back here. So now I have more room to move my geometry around. If I wanted that chair to be way off in the background, I could do that. I'll click on Do for now to get back in the foreground. So that was the depth attribute. There's another important attribute here too. To go back to that attribute editor. And that's underneath image name. Of course, image name defines what image you're using or what movie you're using. Now, when you're using the image sequence and you click on the first frame is the only one that's listed. And in fact, if I scrub the timeline, I don't see any change. It's only loading up that first frame, and it's permanent. However, if you go back here and click on Use Image Attribute, That'll force Maya to bring in one frame at a time for our image sequence to match to the timeline. So now I've clicked this on Use Image Sequence. What happens is, as I scrub the timeline, it actually loads up all the frames of that sequence. In this case, I only had 9 frames, but if you had more frames, you'd scrub through all those frames. So here's frame 1 of that video, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. In this case, you can see the car moving across the ground. You can even use your playback controls and play back that image sequence. And as I said, if you had a longer sequence like 100 frames, you'd be able to play back all 100 frames in order. All you have to do is click on the Use Image Sequence. Of course, you do have to make sure the frames are numbered correctly, and you have to use that traditional numbering technique that we discussed earlier, which is name.number.jpg, where you have appropriate padding. But as long as the image is numbered correctly, Use Image Sequence will bring it in the correct order. This also works for movies. Say you brought in an AVI film. Of course, it's only one file name, but if you click this on, then Maya knows to step through each frame of that AVI movie. So now rendering. So aside from using your image planes as reference, you can render and also have your objects appear. So we'll render this out and scale down this render view window so you can see it. There's the 3D geometry in front of the image plane. So it's really almost like a poor man's compositing tool. Now, of course, using a real compositing program like After Effects or Nuke is much better to combine your 3D with the background, but it's a good, easy solution if you want to do something very basic. Now, if you choose the batch render, the image plane will be attached to that camera and you'll get it in the batch render. So if you feel that you're done with the image plane and you're finished with it in terms of reference, you want to just get rid of it, you can do that. You go up to the hypershade, you'll find the image plane attached to the camera. So if you go to the Cameras tab and look for the camera where you attached it, there it is right there. There's an image plane. All you have to do is click on it and press the delete key, and the image plane goes away. And there it is. Now it's gone. Now you can always bring back another one if you want to. Just go to the same menu, View, Image Plane, Import Image or Movie. And again, you can do this for any camera you want to. For instance, the side view, Image Plane, Import Image. So image planes are a great trick, and often they're used simply for reference, particularly for modeling. If you want to, say, model a very specific object, you can take a photo of it and load that photo into Maya as image plane, and then proceed to model on top of it.